Good morning, everyone. My name is Marco Minocchi, and I'm the Regional Communication Officer at the ILO Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to today's event on the presentation of the 1986 Amendment to the ILO Constitution for the Caribbean countries. Before we begin, I would like to go over just a few housekeeping rules to ensure the event runs smoothly. To ensure good sound quality during the session, please keep your microphones muted except when you're given the floor. This session will also be recorded and made available on the ILO website soon. Please also make sure your full name appears correctly on Zoom so we can give you the floor in case you raise your hand. You can do this by clicking on the three dots at the top right of your image and then click on Rename. Okay, so moving ahead with our meeting. In 1986, the International Labour Conference adopted an amendment instrument proposing significant changes to 11 of the 40 articles of the Constitution of the International Labour Organization, which will be discussed in detail during this session. To begin, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Ana Virginia Moreira Gomez, the ILO Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, for our opening remarks and the presentation of the amendment instrument. Regional Director, you have the floor.
Thank you, Marco. Distinguished representatives of governments, employers, and workers' organizations, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean of the ILO, we thank you for your participation in this meeting on democracy and governance, instrument for the amendment of the ILO Constitution. This event is the result of a joint effort between our regional office, Southern Cone Office, Caribbean Office, and the Office for Central America, Haiti, Panama, and the Dominican Republic. Today, we intend to present and explain in detail the content of this amendment and answer any questions that may arise. This is one of the three events we are organizing in our region. We had a first event in Brazil. The second one was aimed at Latin America, including Haiti, and the third one for the Caribbean countries. On June 24, 1986, during the 72nd session of the International Labour Conference, the 1986 Instrument of Amendment to the ILO Constitution was adopted by a vote of 352 in favor, 44 against, and no abstentions. The objective of this amendment was to make the ILO a more representative and efficient organization. Since its adoption, the world has changed considerably. The fall of the Iron Curtain in 1989, the emergence of new states, and their incorporation into the ILO have led us to be an organization with 187 member states today. In addition, the transformations in the world of work associated with globalization, technological change, climate change, and growing inequalities challenge existing labor institutions and governance and require strengthening. As we shall see in the presentation we have prepared, this constitutional amendment is still relevant and covers key aspects of the structure and functioning of the ILO in our current context. Following the initiative of the Director General at the request of the governing body, we are at a decisive moment to push for its entry in force. Currently, 20 member states of the Americas have not yet ratified or accepted the amendment. Canada, the United States, 9 countries in Latin America, and 9 in the Caribbean. Therefore, the objective of this series of seminars is to present the progress that would be achieved with the entry into force of the instrument, making a comparison of before and after the amendment, the advantages regarding the organization's democracy and governance, and the expansion of the participation of the constituents in the organization's decisions. Without further ado, I thank you again for your participation and will continue with the presentation. I believe we have the slides here, and I will do this presentation of the content and the importance of the amendment. Please, next slide. Well, the adoption of the constitutional amendment in 1986 by the International Labour Conference was, according to our Director General, a visionary step. It aims to make the governance of the organization more equitable, democratic, and appropriate to the issues and challenges that the world of work faces today. The importance of the constitutional amendment was highlighted again in the 2019 by the ILO's Centenary Declaration for the Future of Work. We are now in 2024, almost more than 20 years after the approval of the constitutional amendment. Modernization and democratization must not be delayed any more, and these are the words of the Director General. That's what is expressed by the vast majority of the ILO member states, as we'll see today when we present the data on the ratification and acceptance. Of course, a special appeal is made to the member states of chief industrial importance, the ones that are not elected to the governing body, and part of the changes proposed by the amendment. However, it is essential that all member states would ratify and accept the amendment, because this step can make the norm even more legitimate, and it shows the support for this change towards democratization of the governance of the organization. Please, the next slide. This series of seminars and discussions we are having under the promotion of the regional office is part of the decision that was made by the governing body in 2023, where there was an analysis, a dialogue based on a tripartite working group report. And in this discussion in the governing body, it was urged that the 8 members of chief industrial importance that had not yet ratified the amendment would consider its ratification in the shortest possible time. It was also requested to the Director General to take all necessary initiatives to bring this norm into force. And these seminars are part of these initiatives. And our goal here is to promote the discussion in our region based on our own peculiarities and views of the world and of the ILO governance. So we should see these seminars as a first step in this offer by the office to support the states in their own discussion about the eventual ratification or acceptance of the constitutional amendment. Next step, Next slide, please. Very well. Looking at the content of the amendment, the norm proposed significant changes to 11 of 40 articles of the ILO Constitution, and it addresses three main areas: the composition and governance of the governing body, procedure for appointing the Director General, and rules for amending the ILO Constitution. Next slide, please. Concerning the theme number 1, the composition of the governing body. The main aim of the proposed amendment is to make the membership of the governing body more representative by providing a means of appointment that takes into account the various geographic, economic, and social interests of its constituent groups. If the 1986 amendment enters into force, the number of members of the governing body under the Constitution will increase from 56 to 112, and the manner of their allocation will also be affected. Of the 112 seats, 56 would be allocated to government representatives and 28 each to employers and workers' representatives. There would no longer be seats guaranteed for member states of chief industrial importance. So one of the main results of the entry into force of the amendment is that we would only have regular members of the governing body, and that representation would be expanded and would become more representative of the member states of the ILO. Next slide, please. Looking at the composition of the governing body, of the 56 seats reserved for governments, 54 would be distributed among 4 geographical regions: Africa, the Americas, Asia, and Europe, with a minimum of 12 and a maximum of 15 seats for each region. Distribution of seats considering the number of member states within the region, their total population, and their economic activity, assessed by appropriate criteria: gross national product or contributions to the budget of the organization. The initial allocation provided for is, as we see here in the slide, 13 seats for Africa, 12 for the Americas, and alternately 15 and 14 seats for Asia and Europe. The 2 remaining seats would rotate, one between Africa and the Americas and the other between Asia and Europe. The result of this change is that we would have a more balanced representation in the governing body. Next slide, please. The other area of change that would be brought by the constitutional amendment concerns the appointment of the Director General. Under the 1986 amendment, the Director General would continue to be appointed by the governing body, but now it would also be subject to the approval of the International Labour Conference, allowing then for members that are not, for states that are not members of the governing body, to also participate in the procedure of appointment of the Director General. Next slide, please. Concerning the rules applicable to the procedure of amending the Constitution, the 1986 amendment proposes changes to Article 36 of the ILO Constitution that deals with amendments to the Constitution, covering future amendments, and sets out voting and ratification requirements for amendments related to specific considerations. So it's not a change in general, but only on the amendments to specific considerations. Which considerations are those? The adoption of any amendment relating to fundamental purpose of the organization, the permanent establishment of the organization, the composition and functions of its collegiated organs, the appointment and responsibilities of the Director General, the constitutional provisions relating to international labor conventions and recommendations, and the provisions of Article 36 of the Constitution, that is, the rules for amendments to Constitution. Any amendment relating to these themes would require 3/4 of the votes cast and would have to be ratified or accepted by 3/4 of the members of the organization in order to come into effect. So the amendment creates a nucleus of rules whose change becomes more restricted in a way because it would require now 3/4 of the votes cast and the ratification of or acceptance by 3/4 of the members of the organizations. On the other side, there is another change, is that for any other amendment to the Constitution, 2/3 of the votes cast and ratification by 2/3 of the members would be required to take effect. And finally, if we look at Article 36 now, we see that in addition to the current rule, which is for the amendments to the Constitution to be adopted, there is a need of a majority of 2/3 of the votes cast by the delegates present. And there is also a need of ratification or acceptance by 2/3 of the members of the organization, including 5 of the 10 members which are represented on the governing body as members of chief industrial importance. This last requirement would no longer exist. So in the system created by the 1986 amendment, we would need only the approval of 3/4 of the votes cast and the ratification and acceptance by 3/4 of the members of the organization. So in a way, the procedure becomes also simpler. Next slide, please. We can see in this graphic the current regional distributions of government seats on the governing body from June 24 to June 27. And we see here that according to the current rule, we have this distinction between non-elected and elected members and regular members and deputy members. With the enter in force of the Constitutional Amendment 1986, we would have no more of these divisions between non-elective and elected and regular and deputy members. The governing body would have only regular members, and all of them would be elected. And this is a change that goes towards the objective of a more democratic governance. Next slide, please. We see also here a map of the distribution of the ratifications per region, and we We already have to update this map because Australia was the last one from Asia and Pacific, and it's not there showing the map. But for us, it shows how this is distributed today, and how much support it has from all member states of the organization. Going back to the beginning of my talk, even though there is the requirement of a minimum number of ratifications by the countries that are of non-elective and that have a permanent seat today in the governing body, it is crucial that the amendment counts with the highest number of ratification from all member states, because this will show the support of the organization as a whole for this change. Next slide, please. And here we can have a closer look of the stage of ratification of the amendment in our region. So we have the member states of the Americas that have already ratified or accepted the amendment, and the member states that have not yet ratified or accepted. And as I said before, the idea of this seminar is to initiate a space of dialogue nationally among the tripartite constituents about the meaning of this change and how adequate is this change in the governance of the ILO according to the national interests. Considering also that in our view, the main meaning of the changes brought by the amendment of 1986 is the possibility of having a representation that it's more not only more democratic, but it relates more with the shape of forces internationally in our world today. And in this aspect, I think it has a special meaning for Latin American and the Caribbean. I'm a regional director for only 9 months, but I have been in some of the meetings of the governing body. And one thing that I had been amazed, and it's a part of our meetings because we have long meetings, that it's always very, very interesting, has a lot of power, and it calls 100% of my attention, is when members of the Caribbean take the floor and how they bring their view of the world, their necessities, and change totally the dialogue we are having. And it shows how important it is for all states from the different regions, but I'm talking here about our region, to be able to participate and to put their needs and their views also. And I think this is what the constitutional amendment makes it possible. Next slide, please. So what needs to be done for the entry in force of this norm? How can we make sure that these changes happen? Well, the entry in force requires acceptance by 2/3 of the member states, including at least 5 of the non-elective states of chief industrial importance, those states that now are part of the governing body but are now not elected. 127 ratifications have been received, 2 of which are from states of chief industrial importance, India and Italy. Therefore, we need 3 more ratifications from these states since we have already reached the number of 2/3 of the member states. So one condition has been fulfilled, but we need to fulfill the next one. Nevertheless, as I have said before, it is very important for all states to ratify or to accept the amendment, because this shows the support of the organization as a whole and also create a pressure or a nugget for all the states also who are non-elective states of chief industrial importance also to support this change. Next slide, please. And finally, what added value the entry in force of the constitutional amendment would bring? And here we are summarizing what we have discussed so far. We would have a more representative governing body membership. There will be no seats reserved for 10 members of chief industrial importance. Number 2, the direct general appointment would be also subject to the International Labour Conference approval. And this it also is a change that has an effect of the democratization of the governance, since some states are part of the governing body, are part of course, are there in the conference, but not part of the governing body. And we would have a stricter majority requirements for constitutional amendments. 3/4 of the votes cast required for amendments to important provisions of the ILO Constitution. Emphasizing also that there would be no more need for a minimal requirement of ratifications by members of chief industrial importance, which means a simplification of this procedure on this perspective. Next slide, please. Well, thank you very much. I hope I was able to clarify a bit more. And now I will go back to Marco and we'll open the floor to questions.
Thank you very much, Ana Virginia. So yes, we would like to hear from our tripartite constituents now. So if you wish to speak or ask a question, please raise your hand virtually by using the react button at the bottom of the Zoom window where the heart-shaped icon is. And please introduce yourself before speaking.
Thank you, Marco. I think we have one question in the chat.
Oh, yes. Yes, Dane Alexis, please unmute yourself and you can ask your question. Thank you.
Good morning or good afternoon to everyone from David Messiah from Antigua and Barbuda, the Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union, and I am the General Secretary. Just a quick question for the team. The requirements of us as the partners here, what do we need to do now to seek ratification? This is a matter of an invitation for us to get our governments in our respective areas to seek to ratify those of us who have not ratified as yet. Is this the reason?
Ana Virginia, would you like to answer the question?
Yes, thank you very much, Marco. And yes, that's the reason why we are promoting these seminars, in following also the orientation of the governing body. And the idea, and I think Maribel is here, she might also want to comment on this, is that we wanted to do a tripartite seminar exactly to give this overview to all tripartite constituents, and for workers and employers to also have this conversation and to consider the advantage of the change proposed by the amendment, and to bring this to their governments and start their internal dialogue. And in all this, the office is available to provide more technical information and guidance. And here we gave only this overview on the content and the change, the practical change that the amendment brings. But we are available to continue this conversation, especially when the process starts in each country. For employers and for workers, the main role is to engage the governments in this process. We also have another question in the chat from Kamlesh Ganesh. If I understand correctly, 7 of the states of chief industrial importance are still not on board. Does the ILO have any information regarding the reasons behind, and are there projections for how or when they might be on board? In fact, 8, we have had 2 ratifications from these states of chief industrial importance. The ILO has organized in the last conference a meeting among these states with the Director General, similar to what we're having here, where there was discussed the practical implications, and they were all invited to start the procedures nationally. Well, it's hard to say what are the reasons behind non-ratification or acceptance so far, because each state has its own reasons, its own internal discussion. But as I said before, the important at this moment is to start this dialogue. And it doesn't matter if the country is one of the 10 countries, because we believe, and that was the impression also in the governing body, that the more support that the amendment has, the stronger is the movement for it to enter in force. And this will create a pressure also to the members that right now are non-elected to accept the change.
Thank you, Anna. There's another question on the chat box. How can ABMOs in the Caribbean from countries such as Suriname that have already ratified the amendment contribute to further advancing its implementation or support other member states in the ratification process?
Yes, we will share the PowerPoint, and in our website of the regional office, we also have a link to question and answers on the constitutional amendment. So that's it's a material very similar with the PowerPoint we have. And I think that was a very good question. The countries that have already ratified or accepted the convention can also contribute, starting a conversation among the states in your sub-region and giving the impressions and the testimony about how important this constitutional amendment is. So there is a whole also for the states who have already ratified. And I see this very clear in the Caribbean, because these are states who have a very strong regional identity and the interests are similar. So I see this region as a region that has a synergy with the goals of the constitutional amendment. And that would, for example, the 100% ratification or acceptance by Caribbean countries would send a very strong message, in our view.
Thank you. Representative from Antigua, sorry, you're requesting the floor again. Please, sir, go ahead.
Okay. The question that I'm asking this time around is there a timeline for the ratification for us to have, I mean, by our respective countries, for those of us who have not ratified?
Thank you very much for your question. There is no timeline in the text of the amendment. So, but on the other side, in this we have mentioned in our previous seminar, this is a very current theme, the democratization and governance of, in a more general terms, of the United Nations. So, and our amendment is from 1986. So there is no timeline, but it's about time for this norm to take into effect. We have another question, if the recording of this session will be available. It will be available in our website, and then it can be shared. Marco?
Yes, the recording of both events in English and Spanish will be made available on our website in the coming days. Are there any further questions? I don't see any hand risen, no? Not even in the chat. So if that's the case, we can proceed with, and I would like to give you back the floor if you wish to make any closing remarks, and then we will give the floor to our colleagues from ACTEMP and ACTRAV. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco. No, just to thank all the participants in this seminar, and highlight again that we are available to give all the technical support that is needed for the countries who want to start the procedure of ratification or acceptance of the constitutional amendment. So we can, of course, we can share the PowerPoint, the recording, but we can also follow on with a more individualized support for different countries. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you. Okay, so now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Andres Uren, who's our senior regional specialist for employers activities here based in Lima, in the ILO office for Latin America and the Caribbean. Andres, please go ahead.
Thank you, Marco. And I would like to start by thanking all the participants that joined us today to this very important meeting, particularly those representing employer and business membership organizations, EBMOs. Also, I would like to thank the regional director, for the excellent presentation of what this amendment means to members. I think she was able to put in very clear terms something that might seem complex, but at the end, that is very important for the governance of our organization. I would recall that in 1986, at the time when the text of the amendment was adopted in the International Labour Conference, the employers group did not vote for this amendment because the ILO Constitution is an international treaty of which only governments are members. Therefore, social partners are not part of the voting of this kind of changes. However, it is very important to underline that the employers group at that time supported the amendment, as they obviously saw the benefits of making the ILO a more democratic institution with greater opportunities of participation of a broader range of countries. It's also very important to mention, particularly for EBMO's representatives, that this amendment doesn't have any negative impact on for the involvement of business in the ILO. In the contrary, This amendment would increase the number of employer members in the governing body from 36 to 38, of which 28 would be titular members and 10 would be deputies. I would just like to close my remarks by inviting EVMO's representatives in the Caribbean to approach their governments and tell them how important this amendment is for the governance of this institution that involves you. It is very important that social partners, both employers and workers organizations, are on board on this important decision, as it would be a reflection of the spirit of Convention 144 of tripartite consultations and tripartite support. So I would close my remarks with this, Marco, and just inviting our EVMO's representatives to approach and to try to convince their governments to ratify this important amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andres. And now I would like to invite Ms. Maribel Batista, who's the ILO Regional Specialist for Worker Activities, also based in the ILO Office for Latin America and the Caribbean, for some remarks. Maribel, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. I would like to appreciate the opportunity given to us be director of the ILO Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean, to have a few words at the close of this tripartite event on democracy and governance on the ILO, in which the 1986 amendment to the ILO Constitution was presented and analyzed with your constituent, in special the trade union, and your excellent presentation, Directora. As has been said, the amendment aims to ensure that the governing body is composed in such a way that it is as representative as possible, taking into account two different geographic, economic, and social interests of each of the three groups that constitute it in ILO. I would like to highlight the following aspect. The trade union organization did not vote for the adoption on the amendment, which is, as Andre indicated, a power of the government, but they expressed their support for it. That the amendment does not have a negative impact on the participation of trade union organization in the ILO governing body, and work contributed to strengthen the governance and democratic participation of work constituent in the governing body, resulting in a better performance of the organization in favor of social justice. Improving governance is key for the organization to be able to face the challenges of the current and future work and the constant and rapid changes that occur in this time, to promote decent work and more equitable society. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Maribel. So we have reached the end of this event. We thank you so much for your participation. Please note that the office, as mentioned by also the regional director, is available to address any further questions or concern about this amendment instrument. And also, as we said in the beginning, the recording of this event and the PowerPoint presentation will be made available on our website in the upcoming days. My colleague Miguel has put the link on the chat box, so it will be easy for you to find the recording. Thank you very much, and we wish you an excellent day.